and as you can see, I have a little bit of a different setup today. I thought it'd be fun to go through my Goodreads reading stats and see which years I did a really good job reading and which years I wasn't very good at reading. I'm just really bored and I thought it'd be kind of different and fun. I've seen other booktubers do this, so I thought I'd kind of hop on the bandwagon and give it a whirl. I really haven't gone through my reading stats that much lately. I always forget you can do that, so I thought it'd be kind of fun. So I got my laptop here. And I'm going to try to screen cap it, but honestly, with my crappy editing software, I'm not sure if I'll be able to actually use it. Goodreads is the best way for me to track my reading. I didn't start using it until 2015. I had an account in 2013, but I never really added my books to it. I just kind of read books. I don't have any books recorded really until 2015 because that's when I really started to be consistent and using Goodreads. Goodreads is really great for tracking your books and sharing your reading stuff with other people. However, the site itself is kind of clunky. I think they really should update it because it's kind of hard to follow at times and it's hard to find things and even add friends, which is kind of annoying. But overall, it's a really good way to track your reading and see how many pages you've read or how many books you've read throughout the year. Alright, so let's get started. So first, we're going to go to 2015. I only read 65 books, but that was actually pretty good because they were all really long books for the most part. They were normal sized books. I read 25,177 pages across 65 books. That's not terrible. The longest book I read was 932 pages, which was The Heir of Novron by Michael J. Sullivan. I don't remember a whole lot about that series, but it is a trilogy, but then it breaks off. There are smaller series within it, I believe. The shortest book I read was The Lord of the Rings official movie guide. That was only 120 pages. The most popular book I read in 2015 was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. So definitely 2015 was the year I started booktube because I would not have read any of these books if it wasn't for booktube. The highest rated on Goodreads that I read was Queen of Shadows, of course. It's by Sarah J. Maas. And oh my gosh, okay, so this is kind of exciting. So the first book I tracked in 2015 was Match by Ali Condi. It's a dystopian trilogy, and basically so you have these special pills that you have to take. You get a red one, a green one, or a blue one. I honestly can't even remember. I'm gonna click on this and see what I thought about this book. Honestly, it's been a long time since I read it, and I didn't actually really like it that well. Oh, basically they have to have to match with somebody because they have to have the perfect mate that they end up with. But I could have sworn there's these pills I think they have to take. It's been a long time. I did not actually really like that trilogy very much, so clearly it didn't affect me all that much. I am very picky when it comes to dystopian novels though. Okay, so moving on. The book I read in 2015 was Fallen Kingdoms. I love that series. I did have a hard time getting into it at first, I remember, which, it's just mostly because sometimes it felt very middle grade at times, in the writing. There was just a lot of, childish elements to it that kind of annoyed me, the way the characters acted. I was just kind of oh my gosh. But then it gets a lot more sophisticated throughout the story, and it is more of a YA version of Game of Thrones, I'd say. There are a lot of different characters, different places, and there's a lot of killing in it, which I was very surprised about. I do really like that series, and I'm glad I read it. That's also the year that the Bloodlines series ended, The Ruby Circle by Rochelle Mead. That was, I think, the last book in that series. I love Bloodlines. I love Vampire Academy. I would, definitely read those over again. Of course, I read the Throne of Glass series in 2015. Changed my life for sure. Got me really into booktube. Oh, okay, so the best dystopian trilogy I've ever read, or I guess it's a series kind of, The Darkest Minds. I read that in 2015, and definitely one of the best ones. I'm not really big in dystopian. It has to be written pretty well for me to, enjoy it. But I actually really love The Darkest Minds. And I remember my dream was to play Ruby if they ever made a movie adaptation, but that already happened and clearly I didn't get cast, so. I also read a few graphic novels that year. I read Eleanor and Pard by Rainbow Rowell. I am not huge in contemporary novels. If you've seen a lot of my videos, I don't talk about contemporary books a lot. Eleanor and Park got me more into contemporary. I read Eleanor and Park and then Fangirl. Fangirl is definitely one of my favorite books of all time, for sure. I just absolutely love it. It's so heartfelt, it's so genuine, it's so honest in how the characters are portrayed. I felt like I could relate to the story really well because of Kath and her college experience and hiding out in her dorm room, not making a lot of friends, being pretty shy, just kind of following her love for her fan fiction. Definitely one of the best contemporaries. 172 Hours on the Moon. Oh my gosh, I love that book. So it's really scary. It's definitely a thriller, but not like super thriller, but it is really like creepy. That book follows these teenagers get picked to go on a trip to the moon. It's supposed to be really cool for them because it's kind of like a new thing, but it's like technology is advanced enough that they're supposed to be safe on this adventure. But as soon as they land on the moon, all this stuff starts happening. Their ship goes down. They have to go out and they like find aliens. It's just not good. Like everything is happening. It's really scary. It's pretty creepy, but it did make me really like more interested in the moon. I love the moon. It's like my favorite part of space. So I loved 172 Hours on the Moon. However, it did make me realize that if my name got picked in this like lottery of going to the moon, I would probably not go unless, I don't know, unless technology was way more advanced than what it was in this and I felt safe, but I don't know. The book that I hated the most, it looks like in 2015, was Hopeless by Colleen Hoover. Her books are all really like romance based, but I was not a fan of that one. I haven't read a lot of her books, but I did give it 3 stars, so I must have liked it kind of. Honestly, 2015 was definitely a good reading year. I read The Archive, The Unbound. That was definitely probably one of my best reading years, even though I only read 65 books. That was my first year on Goodreads. That's like really reading and posting on Goodreads. My first year following booktube. Okay, 2016. This was my junior year of college, and I'm already kind of looking at it, and I don't really think it was my best reading year, but I did read some good books in 2016. So I read 75 books, so it's 10 more books than the year before, and I read 26,433 pages. The longest book I read was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, 870 pages. So when I was rereading Harry Potter, I was so determined to get through all of them, but I got really busy, I guess, junior year or something. I didn't keep reading the series. I stopped after the 5th book. I'm very disappointed in myself because I was really enjoying my reread of those because I hadn't read them since I was like a little kid. So I definitely need to get back into it and reread those because they're so good, and I'm mad that I stopped. My highest rated, of course, was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. That was just like the highest rated on Goodreads. So I started by rereading Harry Potter, and then I read Outlander and Passenger. I remember when I was rereading, was it Passenger or Outlander? Oh, like just thinking about this kind of throws me back to like not the best times. I was participating in OTAs, which were Ohio Theater Alliance auditions, and I was not fond of that. I wasn't really close to a lot of people in college, so I didn't really have a lot of people to hang out with during that time. I remember like I was housed with some other juniors, but I wasn't close to them, so I was having a hard time. I was so uncomfortable, and the audition itself did not really go that well. It was so rough, like just thinking about it. I was definitely either reading Passenger or Outlander at that time. It was just like, now I'm just thinking about it, like, ugh, I just did not have a good time with all that. That was just a bad experience. I mean, OTAs were awesome, but musical theater definitely is not my thing anymore. And I remember they were like, why don't you go to the dance call? And I'm like, I went to the dance call, but it was like the rehearsal dance call, and then I didn't actually go to the other dance call that they had, like the actual one, because I just knew I would be really bad. I was like stuck in the back row, I couldn't keep up with anybody, and I didn't get called back for the dance call anyway, so I thought it'd be kind of pointless, but ugh, I'm just thinking about it, and it's like stressing me out, even though it's way in the past. Okay, moving on. So Truth Witch came out at that time by Susan Dennard. I love that book. I actually have not finished that series, unfortunately. I read The Book Thief at that time as well, and that was a good book. Very dark, very emotional, of course. World War II. I read Starflight. Oh my gosh, I love that book. Starflight is so cute. I didn't have any expectations going into Starflight. I remember it was such a fun read. I like literally was obsessed with the characters, the world, and just the adventure that they were going on. It was so simple, and I rated it 5 stars because I had no expectations and was like pleasantly surprised. The main books I read during this time were Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. Before the book came out, it was like a bind up of all the novellas. I was just reading them one by one on my Kindle, so I counted them each as like separate books, even though they were like super short. But I needed the reading because I was like way behind on my challenge, I remember. I love Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. I remember I didn't think I would like it because I didn't really want to follow Simon in his adventures as like becoming a Shadowhunter. But I was absolutely like blown away by it, and I was so moved and sad by the end. It was so good, and they're important to read for the rest of the series. So after I read those, I read Lady Midnight for the first time. Of course, we're back in the Shadowhunter world. I read A Court of Mist and Fury. Perfect. Okay, so now we're getting into when I was working at Cedar Point. I like read no books that summer. I have the audiobook of Black Widow Forever Read on here, and I remember I'd walk through the park and like have my headphones in listening to that audiobook, but I remember one night I fell asleep listening to it, could not remember anything, so I had to rewind like the whole way through just to get back to where I was. Yeah, I did not really read a lot, because then the rest of these books are all from when I went back to college. I read I'll Give You the Sun, a beautiful, beautiful book. Very emotional. Six of Crows, that was the book of the month for Booksplosion. I think it was for October or November. Honestly, the first time I read Six of Crows, I didn't love it. I mean, I liked it and I thought it was amazing. It was the second time I read it that I fell in love with the characters and the story, and that's when it became my favorite book. And then that's when Crooked Kingdom came out, so I just was able to reread those. I read Gone Girl, amazing, such a good thriller. If you guys haven't read Gone Girl, read it. Don't watch the movie yet. You have to read the book first. I was so blown away by the writing. I hated every single character, but it made me like want to keep reading, which was like crazy. Because it's written so well that you feel everything so deeply. So much anger. I remember I just wanted to throw that book against the wall. I read the first Game of Thrones book. Oh, I love Game of Thrones. I read Shadow and Bone. So that's in the Grisha trilogy. Three Dark Crowns, amazing. Gemina. Okay, so I read 75 books. A lot of them were those short novellas in the Shadowhunter world, but that's okay. You know, 2016 seems like a pretty good reading year. I think I liked a lot of the books that I read, a lot of series, of course, and for the most part, I mean, I reread the Percy Jackson series as well. I mean, 2016 wasn't a terrible reading year. It was pretty good considering I was like working a lot and in school. So I would give myself a nice pat on the back for 2016. Now we're on 2017. 2017 is probably one of my favorite years. I was a senior in college, and senior year is always exciting, but it's also really busy, really hectic. I actually really enjoyed my senior year of college. I liked it way more than like my other years of college. So let's see what these books bring up in my memories. So I read 24,298 pages across 66 books. So I read one more book than in 2015, but like 1,000 pages less. So clearly I was reading shorter books, which I always get because sometimes I just like rush through and I just need to read short books so I can keep up on my reading challenge, which isn't like the best thing to do. It's better to like read books you enjoy and like not rush them. But the longest book I read was Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. I think that's the second book in the Game of Thrones series. So it's 1,010 pages, and the shortest book I read was 27 pages. It was a graphic novel. I must have reread A Court, Mist and Fury because that's like, I have it back in the 2017 one. I think I did reread it because that's like my highest rated on Goodreads. Okay, so far I like the books that I read so far in 2017. So I read A Clash of Kings. I finished the Grisha trilogy. Those books were okay. I'm not like super impressed, but I obviously like enjoy them. I read Carve the Mark. I loved Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. I really was impressed with the world building. When I went back and reread it, I was honestly a little confused by like things she would bring up and just like the world itself. It was hard for me to visualize at times in my reread, but I do still really enjoy it. I like that it's like sci-fi and fantasy combined. Oh, I read Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. I was obsessed with this book and I will recommend it over and over again. So Attachments follows this guy who is like an IT, like techie guy at an office. His job is not only to like fix computers and stuff, but he has to like go through people's emails to make sure that they're like not doing anything wrong. He develops this crush on this girl even though he's never met her, just from like reading her emails. And that sounds kind of creepy, like it's a little weird, but I thought it was so cute, and the way it's written is just so beautiful and lovely because you get her perspective once in a while, but then you also get like his perspective, and it's just like the way they fall in love. It's just so cute and I love it. Attachments by Rainbow Rowell, definitely a great contemporary. Okay, so 2017, at this point in the reading year, I am working at Cedar Point, so I literally did not read like any books apparently. I read a book of poetry. I read Too Late by Colleen Hoover. Would not recommend, hated that book. Read Rebel Rising, which is a Star Wars book, and then I read Lord of Shadows, which I just finished last night. Oh my gosh! Okay, so Saga just came up in here by Brian Vaughan, and I was like, I did not read that year, but I did. I read the first book in that graphic novel series on my Kindle, which was stupid because the artwork is amazing and you need to have the physical book to enjoy it. I only read the first one, and then I read Lumberjanes. I started The Bad Beginning, which is the first book in the series of Unfortunate Events. I wanted to reread all of those because they're super short, and I remember I was at home at that time. I think it was I on Brady? No. I don't know what. I was at home, I remember, and I was like, I'm just gonna read through these in like a week. I didn't. I read the first one and that's it. My lowest rated book was Paper Princess by Erin Watt. Y'all, I hated that book so much. Toxic. Completely toxic, disgusting, vile. I don't know why I finished it. I don't know how it has any good ratings on Goodreads. It's just disturbing. If you like it, I'm so sorry. It's just so bad. And it was just made me feel so uncomfortable the whole time. This girl gets like adopted into this royal family and they're like rich and they abuse her so much, like the way they talk to her. Oh, she's like surrounded by all these men, but then they end up falling in love with her. It's so gross. I hate it. It's like terrible. Definitely not a good book. So 2017, I beat my reading challenge by reading 66 books instead of 60, but I didn't read as much and like all my books were a lot shorter. So you know, you win some, you lose some. 2018, here we go. I read 83 books in 2018, and I read 28,649 pages. So that's like really good. So I'm very impressed because I don't think I read that. My longest book was A Storm of Swords, of course, by George R.R. Martin, 1,179 pages. I was reading a lot of sci-fi at the beginning of 2018. Okay, so 2018, before I moved to Chicago, I was living at home still, and then I moved here in like February. And I remember like all I did was read, so I had a lot of time on my hands. I read a bunch of Mass Effect books. I read a lot of sci-fi. Oh my gosh. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Oh my gosh, I read that. That was so good. I love that book. It's not like, there's not a lot of action that happens. It's more so very subtle, but it's sci-fi and it's written really well. The characters are great. There's like LGBT romance in there. And it's just like really cute. Like it's just like a good sci-fi read. It's not like super intense, but I really enjoyed it no matter what. And then I also read Scythe. I had been seeing Scythe by Neil Shusterman pop up a lot, like in libraries, at bookstores, just on booktube, but I was always like not that intrigued by it because I thought it looked dumb. No, Scythe is so good. In a world where humans have beaten death, they have these people called scythes come around and glean people when it's their time to die. They can do it their own type of way. Each scythe can kind of pick their own method for killing, but then we get this group of people who do like mass gleanings, basically like mass shooting sort of. They kill a bunch of people at one time and then they don't have to kill for the rest of the year because they're just constantly killing like huge groups of people to meet their numbers. The other scythes are more subtle and they're like, oh hey, like you're gonna die tomorrow, and so like do you have any last things you want to do? Some of the scythes make sure families can like talk to each other first before like die. That was like such a good book. I was very impressed by it. I was kind of annoyed by the romance in it, I remember, but then Thunderhead was also really good. Unfortunately, when I read The Toll last year, I was not that impressed, which is sad because I liked the other two so much. I finished the Fallen Kingdom series, which I didn't even know that Immortal Reign was the last book, which clearly looks like it would be the last book, but I read it and I was like, wait, this is the last one? I didn't realize it till like I finished, so I was like, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought. Just like looking at all these books I read, I remember I had a lot of time on my hands when I first moved here, but I also like made sure I read a lot while I was on the train, going to work and whatnot. Throughout the year, I did slack off a lot. I read the Yotsuba Ann manga series. That's the only manga I've ever read, and it's so cute. I read like 14 of those, so that kind of took up a lot of my reading challenge. Some of these books I read, I honestly like don't really remember a lot. I feel like I just kind of rushed through reading 83 books and didn't really like comprehend a lot, which is disappointing to me. I read Wolf by Wolf, but honestly, I can't tell you what that's about. I know it's World War II. This girl, I think, is planning to go kill Hitler, I want to say. I don't honestly remember. I read Defy, which I didn't really like. It's kind of like a Mulan retelling. Daughter and Smoke and Bone was not a huge fan. Oh, but I did read Nevernight that year for the first time. Absolutely loved Nevernight. I did read a lot of like Halloween-y books for that year. And then at the end of the year, I started rereading the Throne of Glass series. So 2018, honestly, like I feel like I wasn't that moved by a lot of the books I read. I didn't like a lot of the books I read. Some of these books I just don't really remember like what they were about, which is disappointing. I think it's because when I read a lot of books, I don't really like, my mind just can't keep everything in there, and a lot of the books are really similar to each other. I mean, 2018 was a good reading year, but not amazing. Okay guys, the last year we're going to be doing is, of course, 2019. So this is this past year, so it's not that exciting. Not a lot of big memories happening with these books. Of course, the longest book I read in 2019 was A Feast for Crows. All of my longest books in here are because of Game of Thrones. So, at the beginning of 2019, I was rereading the Throne of Glass series. Of course, amazing. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Definitely one of my favorite books now of all time. I read some acting books. I read The Gilded Wolves. The Gilded Wolves, I think, reminded me a lot of Six of Crows, but I wasn't really a huge fan. I kind of want to reread it because I feel like I rushed through it and didn't really immerse myself into the world, but that also could just be because I didn't like it very much. I honestly can't remember like what happens in that book. Okay, 2019 was me mostly reading the Saga graphic novel series by Brian K. Vaughan. So I said I read the first one in like 2016, but I finally read the rest of them in 2019. I've never read such a good graphic novel series, and it's like fantasy and sci-fi combined because you have this world that's like fantasy more so, and then another world that's like more sci-fi-ish. Like they have a lot more technology, but it's like these two characters combine and fall in love, and you know there's like a war kind of going on between their planets. Oh, it's so good. It's so sad though. So sad. There's a lot of sexual things in that book, so if you're like young, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's so good. The art is amazing. The storyline, it's just, you'll be blown away. You just have to constantly be reading it. You can't just sit and read one and then not read the others. Unfortunately, we have 9 out, and the 10th one is like on a break. They're taking a hiatus before they release the 10th one, and if you know how the 9th one ended, it's just very sad. Then I read the Paper Girl series by the same author. That one is good, but definitely not like my cup of tea when it comes to like reading graphic novels. I'm not a big graphic novel person, but Paper Girl was entertaining, but just I don't really like it as much as I did with Saga. I've read A War Rising. I was not a huge fan of that one, which I'm sad about because I loved Amy Kaufman and Jake Kristoff. They wrote the Illuminate Files together, and I love the Illuminate Files so much, but Aurora Rising was like more disappointing to me. I just like couldn't really get into it. I wasn't really a fan of like insta love. I reread Nevernight, God's Grave, and then I read Dark Dawn. So that was like a good time. I read Five Dark Fates. 2019, there were a lot of series that ended, which I mentioned in some of my videos. Like a lot of series just like were finished, and that like broke my heart, but it was also like made me actually read more books. So really, I feel like I didn't read a lot of books. I didn't even say I read 50 books, and I only read 17,782 pages. That's like literally 11,000 pages less than the year before. Ugh, that's like really horrible. I don't know what my issue was. I remember for 2019 my reading goal was 100 books. I brought it down to 80, and then I brought it down to 50. So I was really busy in 2019. I was like working a lot. I was in a show, which isn't that much. I think I was in a reading slump a lot for 2019. I mean, the books I read I enjoyed for the most part. I finished The Toll, which is the last book in the Scythe trilogy. I did not like it very much. I think I only gave like, did I give it 3 stars? I don't even remember. I didn't really like it. Like I didn't think it was a good conclusion. No offense to anybody. I read Snowden, which was really actually kind of cute, like Christmassy YA novel, more so like winter time. And then I read The Afterlife of Holly Chase, which was so good. If you guys have to read a Christmas book and just want to get in the holiday spirit, read The Afterlife of Holly Chase. So good. It's about this girl who is considered a Scrooge, this rich Hollywood grown-up girl, and she's so annoying and she treats people really horribly. And so one day she gets visited by 3 ghosts, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, just like Mr. Scrooge. And they tell her she's gonna die if she doesn't change her ways. This girl decides not to change her ways, gets killed, which isn't a spoiler because like that's just part of the whole book. She wakes up one day and she is dead, but she's working for this group called Project Scrooge. Their job is to save these people who are Scrooges and to make them change their way and find like a happiness in their life and to treat others a lot better. Holly becomes the ghost of Christmas past. This girl ends up crushing on one of the Scrooges that they're trying to like save. This is like a really cute book. It ended how I wanted it to end. It doesn't end how you might think it will, but it ends so beautifully. It's just like a really wonderful Christmas book, and it really got me into the holiday spirit, and I'm glad I picked it up. It was a quick read, not too much like thinking you had to do. So 2019 was an okay reading year. I only read 50 books, which is kind of disappointing, but that's it. That's all my reading year. I actually really enjoyed that. I kind of liked going through it and being like, oh my gosh, what was happening in my life at this time while I was reading that. And it's like cool that like books can do that, like remembering what you were doing while you were reading that book. Like with the whole like 2016 doing the OTAs, that was just me thinking about that just like gives me more anxiety just thinking about it, even though it's like way in the past. But I can like remember what I was reading at that time, which is crazy. I really love that Goodreads has this feature, and I'm glad I took the time to like go through it and kind of look at what I read, what books affected me in those years. and just how I've improved and how I've kind of struggled over the time with reading. I definitely hope this year's a really strong reading year for me. But that's it. If you guys were bored, I'm sorry. I actually had fun in this video and I'm glad I did something different. In the comments down below, please let me know a book that you read that kind of affected you or like was good for you at a certain time in your life. Like reading the Throne of Glass series was really what got me into booktube, and that got me into reading in 2015, or like the whole 2016 OTAs thing. Like, let me know down below a book that means a lot to you because of something that was going on in your life at that time. And that's all I have for you guys today. If you like this video, be sure to give it a nice little thumbs up. If you want to keep following me on this booktube journey, please subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at EricaAGobble. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!